Good morning, Senior School. Today is our music theory day, so we're going to be talking about non-harmonic tones, triads in first inversion, triads in second inversion, and then we're going to take an analysis of an old English folk song, Auld Lang Syne, where we will be talking about how to liven up and make our four-part harmony songs a little bit more exciting. So, to start, we're going to talk about non-harmonic tones, or non-chord tones, are notes that do not belong in a certain chord. In this example, which you're about to see, the F is the non-harmonic tone because it does not fit the one chord which contains C, E, and G. So let's move on. But before discussing the different types of non-harmonic tones, we need to define two terms: a step and a skip. Step is the interval of a second, so that's when you go from a line to a space next to it, or a space to a line next to it, as you can see in the example. Skip is when you go from a line to a line, or a space to a space, any distance. Okay? A third or more are what skips are. A passing tone, now remember, this is an example of a non-harmonic tone. A passing tone is approached by step, and then continues by step in the same direction. Let's go ahead and give a listen to that passing tone. As you can hear, it occurs in between the chord and doesn't match up with the actual chord that's written, which is a C major in this case. If a passing tone occurs with the second chord instead of in the middle of the two chords, it is called an accented passing tone. Here's what that list sounds like. You can hear it kind of pushes itself into the right harmony there by being in the chord to begin with. A neighboring tone, different kind of non-harmonic tone, is approached by step and then returns by step to the original note. Goes up to the note, comes right back down. Here's what it sounds like. Dee, dee, dee. Adds a little bit of color and a little bit of flavor to the chord. If it occurs within the second chord, it's called an accented neighboring tone, just like the accented passing tone. Here's what that sounds like. Another non-harmonic tone is the anticipation. It is approached by step and then remains the same. It is basically a note of the second chord played early. So we're going from a C major chord to an F major chord, and it's going to anticipate the upcoming chord. You can hear it happening before the chord arrives. Anticipations are never accented. They happen in between chords. An escape tone is approached by step and then skips in the opposite direction. So it goes up a step or down a step, and then up or down a skip. Let's hear what that sounds like. Escape tones are not accented. They always occur between the two chords, just like anticipations. An appoggiatura, my personal favorite, is approached by skip and then steps in the opposite direction. Appoggiaturas are accented because they occur with the second chord. Creates a sense of tension and then resolves the chord. Appoggiaturas are accented. They occur within the second chord. A suspension keeps the note the same and then steps downward. What actually happens is it resolves the chord to a more normal sound. Here's an example. A retardation keeps a note the same and then steps upward. It's like the opposite of a suspension. Both the retardation and suspension are accented. Finally, changing tones use two non-harmonic tones in succession. Here's what that sounds like. Probably something you've heard a few times when listening to music. The first non-harmonic tone is approached by step, then skips in the opposite direction to the second tone. The second tone then resolves by step to the new chord. They are sometimes called double neighboring tones or a neighbor group. While the named non-harmonic tones discussed in this lesson are the most common, composers may choose to use others. So you can see that there is a lot of examples, but what you basically need to understand is that a non-harmonic tone is any time you use notes to move from one chord to another that don't match the first chord that they are a part of. And they can be helpful to make music more interesting, and oftentimes melodies consist almost entirely of neighboring tones. Think about hymns you've seen or listened to. Okay, so we're going to move on now to triads in first inversion. Okay, triads in first inversion. Previously, we learned how to make them and saw what they look like and how to analyze them, but I didn't really talk about why the heck we even use them. So one of the first inversions, way we use them is to smooth out bass lines. So remember how when we were making those bass lines earlier, when I was showing you examples, how the bass would always be jumping a lot, but the other voices would kind of stay okay? Well, sometimes we want the bass player or the bass singer to have an easier time, so we use those notes to smooth out the bass line. So look at this example. Notice how the bass line changes direction during the second 5 chord, right? It's going down, then up a little, down a little, then up by a bunch. And go ahead and I'll just play this so you can listen. And by placing that chord in first inversion, the bass line becomes smoother because now the third of the chord is on the bottom. And it doesn't affect the overall tonality or the overall major or minorness of the sound, so it's a decent way to keep things smoother in the voices. Look at how all of those voices have very close intervals. We can also use first inversion when repeating a chord to make a different sound. So in this example, the first 2 chords are duplicates, but it's a little boring, so maybe we feel like it needs more excitement. Here's what it sounds like without any changes. So instead of altering the top voices, let's just change the inversion. Same sound, but you can hear it's now going somewhere. So the diminished triad presents the final use for first inversion. Early composers, like the ones in the Renaissance, Middle Ages, and Baroque, did not like using these intervals because they sounded off. Okay? Notice that a root position diminished triad contains a diminished fifth. That's called a tritone. We've talked about that. The second inversion of the same triad contains an augmented fourth, which is different. Only the first inversion contains no augmented nor diminished intervals. Sorry, when I meant different, I meant basically the same. An augmented fourth and a diminished fifth are the same interval size, just a different name. So the second chord in the middle contains neither of those intervals. So that's why a lot of composers, when they use diminished triads, will use them in first inversion so they can avoid those clashing sounds. While root position diminished triads are used occasionally, second inversion is rarely seen or encountered. Okay? And it should be noted that the examples presented in this lesson are not strict rules. Sometimes first inversion is used simply because a composer likes its sound. So guys, that's another reminder to keep in mind that sometimes it's okay to do something outside of the rules just because you like it. And there's no hard and fast rules in composition other than some basic ones we've already learned. So keep that in mind when you're making lessons, okay? Next, we're going to talk about triads in second inversion and how to use them. While composers use root position and first inversion triads freely, second inversion usually occurs in 3 different situations. 1, it might be used to smooth out a bass line. Look at the example and let's listen to it first. But by using second inversion, the bass line gets to go in stepwise motion rather than by leaping up a fifth. The second inversion triad used in this fashion is called a passing 6/4 chord. 6/4 just means it's in second inversion, and passing means that it occurs in between to help smooth out the line. Second inversion can also be used to straighten a bass line. Look at this example, leaping all over the place. Let's hear, listen to it. But by using second inversion, we can actually keep that bass line the same and eliminate any movement. You'll encounter that often. Second inversion triad used in this fashion is called a pedal 6/4 chord. A pedal just means that it's a bass note repeated over and over again. Now this is a fancier one, but it's the cadential 6/4 chord is the final and most noticeable use. In this form, the second inversion triad precedes a 5 chord in a cadence. So look at the example. We've got 1, 4, 1 in second inversion, 5, 1. This is what we talked about last week. These are authentic cadences. Let's give a listen to this. Often the cadence will sound stronger due to the cadential 6/4 presence. You can hear it going towards its final sound. So let's go ahead and look at this again as it resolves to the 5 chord. We talked about this a little bit, about how notes go to the ones that's closest to them. Some theorists prefer to identify the cadential 6/4 chord as a 5 with 2 non-harmonic tones, meaning it's basically the same thing as a 5 chord, in this case G and G, with 2 E and C as a non-harmonic, meaning tones that don't match the chord. We talked about those earlier in the video. And they often explicitly show the resolution in their analysis. So it's going from a 6/4 to a 5/3. Remember, normal root position chords like this one here are 1-3-5. Although we will use 1, you should be aware that some people occasionally think differently. So here we go. On the chord progression chart, the cadential 6/4 occurs in between the 2 and the 5, or the 4 and the 7. And don't forget, we talked about this in the first triad idea. 7s are often also done in first inversion in order to resolve to a 1 more smoothly. So once again, guys, there's just a lot of different ways to explore this and understand how this music works. So let's go ahead now and take a look at all of that in a song called Auld Lang Syne. So as you can see, we've got Auld Lang Syne written up. This is a Scottish ballad that's often sung actually at New Year's Eve, the beginning of the new year. So here's just the first couple of measures in this piece. So first we must determine the key. Since we've got 1 flat, we have 2 possibilities, right? We've got F major or go down 2 notes to D minor. First chord, though, looks an awful lot like an F major chord, so I think we can probably safely assume that we are in the key of F major. The next measure contains only F's, A's, and C's, which is easy for us. That means that all 4 chords are a 1 chord. So we don't need to repeat that analysis symbol because they're all the same. When we go to the next measure, we have a 5 chord, a dominant chord. C, C, E, and G, and a C major triad. Thus, it's a 5 chord. Okay, easy to read, easy to see. The second chord, though, contains C, C, D, and F. This doesn't really match any triads, so we're going to come back to that. And the third measure duplicates the first, and finally the 4 chord contains a C, B flat, E, and A. This one also doesn't fit into the triads nicely, so we're going to skip it. The next measure contains FAC. Again, all 4 chords are 1 chords, same measure almost as measure 1. And lastly, it ends on a 4 chord. So that means that we are ending on a kind of a little bit of an odd place, but we'll come back to that later. So let's go back and analyze those question marks that we skipped over. If we consider non-harmonic tones, the first skipped chord can be analyzed as a continuation of the 5 with 2 neighboring tones. So we still have our C, but we just have a couple of tones dropping down in the chord to create harmonic interest. And the second skipped chord, though, this last question mark, this is a trickier one. So let's take a look at it. When voicing 7th chords, composers sometimes leave out the 5th. Remember, we've got 4 notes in a 7th chord, the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. Occasionally, composers will leave out that 5th chord. But notice that the bottom 3 notes are the root 3rd and 7th of a C dominant 7th chord. That would be C, B flat, and E. C, E, skip G, B flat. But we can make it easy on ourselves and analyze that as a 5-7, okay, a 7th chord with a non-harmonic A, meaning we have an A in there that doesn't match the chord. Since the A is approached by step and then skips, it's an escape tone. It goes G, A, down to F. That's an escape tone. We talked about that as well at the beginning of the video. And then this analysis is reinforced by the fact that 5 chords commonly resolve to 1. So 5 usually goes to 1. Let's go ahead and listen to this, see if you can hear those escape tones and the different chord structures that are in this piece. So you can tell by the phrase that this is not a finished piece, right? There's more to this song. Ending on a 4 chord is a little strange. We know that we're going somewhere. But these neighboring tones, they're really important because neighboring tone and escape tone, these non-harmonic tones, are really important because they help to clarify the melody and help us to hear some harmonic interest. So never be afraid to use them or to think about using them when you compose your music. And in the purposes of our compositions, since we're only using half notes, it would be perfectly fine to throw in a couple extra quarter notes in between those half notes to create that harmonic interest if you feel so inclined to do so. But that's all I want to talk about for today. This is just a couple more ideas for you to incorporate in your compositions. Today, for your homework assignment, all you need to do is turn in your first draft of your 4-part harmony compositions. Remember, they need to be 8 measures long, need to be comprised mostly of half notes with no rests. And I also need a small analysis of what chords you chose to use in Roman numeral analysis. There's a piece of paper, remember there's a document posted as well that will help you figure all those things out. Alright guys, I hope you have a great day. This is our only day this week. This is the only thing I want you to do. For the rest of the days, I want you to work on your composer biographies and continue practicing your instruments. I will talk to you later. I hope you have a wonderful 3-day week. Bye-bye.